Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 30 deadline decisions. This is a weekly series where I take you through your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline. If you get any use out of today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, I'm actually going to start the video by making a very cheeky request. Today is my birthday, the 29th of March, and I'm 27 today, despite lots of you telling me that I look 40 or 50. And can I just ask a little request? If you have watched my videos before and you've not subscribed, please do consider subscribing just as a little birthday present. And if you are subscribed, consider dropping a like on the video. I do really appreciate it, and I appreciate the support over the years as well. But to start today's video, we're going to look at the key press conference updates that we had on Thursday and Friday ahead of Game Week 30. And then a bit later in the video, I'll answer some of your questions specifically for those of you on Wildcard, those of you not, those of you taking a hit, making transfers, and much, much more. So there's a lot to get through with the pressers. The first on Spurs. Van de Ven has trained for the past few days and he is available. So this is good news if you have him. It's also good news if you have Spurs defenders, because we know how much stronger they are with Van de Ven in defence. Very, very cheap, by the way. So if you can't afford a Udogi or a Porro, but you still want a Spurs defender, you could definitely do worse. Richarlison, we had some sort of confusing information. Some people were suggesting he was injured, some were suggesting that he wasn't. But Postecoglou has basically said Richarlison had a niggle, but he is trained on Friday and he is available too. My interpretation of this would be that Richarlison is fit, but that he's not 100%. And therefore, I would be surprised if Richarlison plays more than 60 minutes in Game Week 30. But he could well start. Spurs could try to wrap up the game and then they could bring him off quite early. If they're 2-0 up at like 50 minutes, it could be that that's all he gets. It's important not just for those people that own Richarlison, but also it does affect Son. We've spoken about the fact that Son is still great on the left, but he's nowhere near as good on the left as he is through the centre. So sadly, it doesn't look like we're going to get a definitive update, and we might not know before the deadline. I would still lean towards saying if he is available, I think he'll start, because I think Spurs in general are much stronger with Richarlison through the middle. So I suppose it will depend upon later today, how's his recovery looked, how fit and available does he feel, and I think that will decide whether he plays. But like I said, I don't think he's playing more than 60 minutes anyway, and therefore I think you're probably getting 60 minutes of Sonny on the left as a sort of worst case scenario, and then you'll get the final 30 minutes of him through the middle. And that may well be when they get most of their chances, when Luton start to tire. On Luton, they have just got so many injuries. And this is one of the things that is making me think that maybe I'm overlooking Son captain. Because if you've watched my videos all week, I've been like, I think I'm going to be on Salah, but I could be on Palmer. I'm actually thinking Son might just be the obvious one, because Luton, the worst defence in the league, especially away from home. And look at this injury list. Ogbene, Adebayo, Anderson, Bell, Brown, Lockyer, Lokonga, Nakamba, Osho, and Potts all remain out. Apparently, they were struggling so much that when they did a head-to-head game in training, I think they had to put a staff member, like a coach, in centre-back because they didn't have enough players. And then apparently he did his hamstring in training. So Luton are really struggling. And if we're looking at fixtures to target, maybe Son is the best captain. I'd love to know down below who you're looking to captain. On Manchester City, Walker and Stones are both ruled out for Game Week 30. And the reason this is important, of course, lots of people looking at potentially benching Bukayo Saka, which I'm actually going to discuss a bit later in the video, whether I think you should or not. But this definitely makes them weaker. I mean, Stones has been out for a while now, or back in and out of the squad, but Walker is very, very essential to the way that Manchester City set up and defend. So I think that is a big loss. Ederson is apparently much, much better, so we would expect Ederson to go back into the 11, and KDB has trained well in full training. So I think KDB and Ederson should be fine, but Walker and Stones look like they'll be ruled out for Game Week 30. On Wolves, Hwang is now back on grass, apparently, and he's hopefully going to be back in around 3 weeks, or less than 3 weeks, was the quote. Game Week 34 is in about 3 weeks. So if you've got Hwang and you're not free hitting in 34, if you can get away with benching him over the next few, it might be worth the risk of hanging on to him, but you are obviously losing out on a lot of points in the meantime. But he could become an option on free hit for us, if again he's fit by then. There was no mention of Cunha, from what I've seen anyway. I'm obviously recording this directly after the pressers, but apparently he's been back in full team training. There are pictures and videos of him in full team training. It looks like if he's not available for 30, he will be available for 31, which is the game against Burnley for Wolves. So I think Cunha's a fine pick on Wildcard if you can get away with him potentially not playing this week, but he could also be back too. On Newcastle, we got a few updates, although I'm not sure how much I ever believe Eddie Howe. But apparently it is a possibility that Trippier, Barnes and Livramento could return for Game Week 30. I would just say that it's probably quite likely that we'll get some training pictures from Friday today. So we should get a little bit more information around whether Trippier has been in training. But there are rumours circulating by some pretty reliable Newcastle accounts that Trippier has been in full team training. I would predict that Trippier therefore will start and be available. So if you want to pick him on your wildcard, or if you already have him, my interpretation of what we currently have is that Trippier should be fine. And Botman has had his ACL surgery. They did opt for surgery, and it sounds like that might rule him out for the remainder of 2024. But at the very least, it of course it rules him out for the rest of this season, which means that Lascelles is a very good pick on wildcard, or even looking to bring in a cheap defender this week. On Liverpool, Alisson, Trent and Jota are apparently not too far away, but not in yet, was the full quote, and they could be returning to training next week. We don't know which one is slightly further along than the others, but the three of them are sort of being discussed together at the moment. And therefore, if you have Bradley and you have Kelleher, I would be surprised if you don't get both Brighton and Sheffield United. So I think they're fine picks for the next two. But I do think that Alisson, Trent and Jota are probably targeting a return for Manchester United. That being said, there are some quotes coming out from some Liverpool journalists on Trent suggesting that actually Trent isn't now targeting Manchester United. He's actually targeting maybe Crystal Palace in Game Week 33 as the fixture to return for. So it might be that you get Bradley potentially for even longer than Kelleher, which we thought might be the other way around. But we don't have any definitive information here other than they're not available for this week and potentially not available for the Sheffield United fixture either. On Robertson, apparently he's going to be assessed off the back of the fact that he picked up an injury in the international break. And then Darwin is apparently in full training and he is fine. So that is great news for those of us that are looking to pick Darwin on our wildcard, or if you're looking to bring him in this week. According to Klopp, he should be fine. I will just say there are a few games this week. Liverpool versus Brighton's a big game. City versus Arsenal. We're going to move on to Arsenal now. I'm pretty sure the managers will outright lie because these games are so important that they just don't care. So I would not be surprised if some of this information is incorrect, but I'm just presenting you, obviously, what they gave us in the press conferences. On Arsenal, we have the biggest liar of the lot, which is Arteta. Arteta and Howe have just been terrible all season. Supposedly, and I've added the word supposedly here because I just don't buy it, Saka, Gabriel and Martinelli have supposedly not trained. He said that there is a chance they're available for Sunday, but based on the fact they've not trained, he was kind of giving this, they might not be available. He's not going to come out and go, yep, Saka, Gabriel, Martinelli are absolutely fine, and they're going to start. In fact, Pep Guardiola, here's the starting 11 against you. It's such an important game that they are probably both going to play mind games. So I would not be surprised if there's some information we don't know about either City or Arsenal that we're just not given. My interpretation of this is I would be extremely surprised if Saka and Gabriel aren't fit and available. I don't know that, but I just would be so surprised if they genuinely haven't been in training. I think if they hadn't been in training, I think what you'd see is the opposite from Arteta. I think if they genuinely weren't available, he'd say, yeah, they're fine, to then play the mind games the other way. So I don't think this tells us a whole lot, but I would imagine they're okay. And we might get some leaked team training pictures at some point, although, again, we've seen it in the past, they actually sometimes hide pictures and videos from players that they don't want opposition to know about. There's lots of mind games that go on here. On Crystal Palace, Munoz, who knows? I called him Who Knows Munoz because I still don't know how to pronounce his name. The fantastic attacking defender from Crystal Palace that lots of people are looking at. I'll probably have him on my free hit 34. He picked up an injury in the international break and he is apparently fine and available and he's been in team training. So Munoz, we're going to go for. I think that was pretty good that time. He's going to be okay for Game Week 30 according to the manager in the press conference. Outside of that, Elise returns to partial team training, which again is great news for me and those of us that are looking to free hit in 34, because I doubt anyway, a lot of people will be able to get to Eze and Elise. And given the double that they have, I may well have a 3-5-2 with both Elise and Eze, get my words out there. And I think they could be really nice options. It could even be that I go for Elise instead of Eze. So I like to have that option there. And I do think this in general makes the Crystal Palace attack much stronger. On Aston Villa, the only real thing to update you on is that Cash picked up an injury in the international break and he is out for 2 to 3 weeks. So if you were relying on Matty Cash this week, sadly, he will not be available. Not that he would have definitely started anyway, but this obviously rules him out. And obviously, McGinn is still suspended as well, so that may affect how far forward Douglas Luiz can play. And then finally on Chelsea, there were a few sort of question marks going around because Cole Palmer didn't feature for England. And arguably, he deserves a place more than anyone at the moment. So there are a few concerns around why isn't he playing? Is he maybe not fully fit? But apparently Palmer is okay and training well. So there is no issue with Cole Palmer there. He's absolutely fine. And Sanchez is out injured. And the reason I bring that up is some people were concerned about maybe Petrovic losing his place later on in the season. But if Sanchez is out injured, even if it's only for a few weeks, if Petrovic continues to play well as he has been, I would be surprised if Sanchez gets in ahead of him in the Premier League. Maybe in the Cup, but probably not in the Prem. So there we go. I think I've covered all of the key press conference updates there. Let's now go on to answering some of your key questions around Game Week 30. So ahead of Game Week 30, lots of people looking at their defence and thinking, God, that is stinky. And I'm not going to lie, my defence was stinky before my wildcard. But also, for those of you on the wildcard, you'll also need to be picking 5 defenders. So I think it is quite important to just have a bit of a chat this week about the defenders that I would be targeting for this week. And I've tried to separate it into 2 camps. Obviously, there are further camps, i.e. if you're bench boosting or not, or if you're someone that likes taking risks, likes to take hits, prefer attacking defenders, are looking at clean sheets. There are lots of different ways to look at this. But largely, I think the key difference will be, are you free hitting in 34? Because if you're not, that is the biggest double game week of the season, and it's obviously the most immediate double game week as well. So if you're not free hitting, you really need to target preferably defenders that double in 34. But if you are free hitting, you can of course completely skip that. So you need to be targeting more defenders that either have good immediate fixtures or potentially double in 37 instead. So if you are free hitting, which is the position that I'm in, I think you are largely targeting Chelsea and Spurs because they have the double-double later in the season, and they also have some pretty good immediate fixtures, and they also have some very attacking defenders as well. So Udogie, Gusto, and Porro will be right up there as the top 3 for me. Which ones you go for, it's up to you how you see the fixtures going and how you see these 2 teams defending. But I think Gusto, considering his price, is a great option. I know Reece James will be back at some point, but that doesn't bother me too much now because there is a lot of upside right here, right now. And whether Reece James can stay fit, we haven't seen that from him in recent years. So I'm still happy picking Gusto, but I would also consider, like I said, the Spurs defenders. I do prefer Udogie and Porro to Romero and Van de Ven just for the attacking threat. And I do prefer Udogie to Porro slightly, I think, just given you're saving so much money because the attacking data between the two doesn't differ that much. So I think there would be a notable increase in Porro's data in comparison to Udogie's. If Maddison wasn't fit, I'd be all over Porro because he'd have every single set piece. But right now, Maddison's taken a lot of set pieces off him. So I think I'd have it at the moment, Gusto, Udogie, Porro. I still think Lascelles is worth picking up even if you're not on a wild card, just given that he should start. Newcastle's fixtures are great and he'll double in 37. And I know Newcastle haven't been great defensively, but at that price, can you really complain? And it could free up the money to get the likes of Salah back into your team. So Lascelles feels great. And Kieran Trippier, if you have just brilliant team value, or you just have that money available and you don't feel the need to use it, Kieran Trippier is a seriously decent option. And he's obviously, I would argue, he's better than anyone on this list, considering the fixtures and attacking threat. But he's also incredibly expensive. And money does become an issue if you're looking to bench boost soon. And then I'll just put in 6th Dalot. That's not Manchester United bias, but beyond 35, the fixtures are just so good for Manchester United. They have the double too, and he does have some attacking threat. He links up really nicely with Garnacho on that right-hand side when Garnacho plays on the right. So I really do like Dalot as an option. He's the only Man United defender I would consider, by the way. Lots of people are asking about when Maguire's fit. Martinez could be back for Game Week 30, by the way, but he's been so injury-prone this season. Luke Shaw might get games in the sort of 37, 38 maybe, but not for now. Wan-Bissaka could play left-back, but so could Lindelof. Wan-Bissaka could play right back with Dalot at left back. Like, there are loads of different combinations we can have. I just don't see anyone that's worth going for outside of Dalot and maybe Onana. So that's if you're free hitting in 34. If you're not free hitting in 34, all of the defenders that I've listed here obviously double in that game week. So 8 Nuri would be the top of my list. I still have him on my wildcard, by the way. So 8 Nuri is one of those that, even if you're not free hitting in 34, I certainly think you could justify picking him given the short-term fixtures. And also in game week 35, he plays against Luton at home. In game week 37, he plays against Crystal Palace at home, by the way. So I said this in my team selection video. And if you've not yet seen that, I am wildcarding this week. Feel free to go and watch that team selection video. 8 Nuri could be there for the remainder of the season for me. I wouldn't even mind bench boosting him against Palace at home in 37. So I really like 8 Nuri. We just spoke about Munoz, who knows. I think he's a great option as well. The attacking threat, like I said, through the roof. He scored in the international break as well for Colombia. And I just really like that double home fixture in game week 34. The issue with Crystal Palace defenders is their fixtures in 32 and 33 aren't great. So you get a good one in 30, a good one in 32. Then they've got like Liverpool and City or something along those lines. Liverpool and Arsenal. It's someone like that. They've got two difficult fixtures in 32 and 33. So you probably can't get away with starting them in those game weeks. So it really depends when you need a defender, which one I would target. Whereas 8 Nuri's fixture this week isn't as good, but 31, 32 and 33 are much stronger for Wolves. So like I said, just have a look when you might need to play that defender. Gabriel, Ben White, Saliba, Kivior, you could even go for if you wanted to, if you think he's nailed. I would worry a little bit about his minutes. And I just think Gabriel's the one. He's got the best attacking threat in the league for goal threat this season for defenders. He's cheaper than Ben White. He's probably more nailed than Ben White. I see very little reason to go without Gabriel if you're looking for an Arsenal defender. Van Dijk deserves some consideration, as does Bradley, by the way, but we just think that Trent will probably be back by game week 34, so you wouldn't get the benefit of Bradley in the double. So if you can afford Van Dijk and you're not free hitting in 34, I just think that makes a lot of sense. And then lastly, Everton. I know they have Liverpool in the double, but the other fixture is Nottingham Forest at home. So if we're looking at clean sheet potential in that double, Everton have a very good chance in that first fixture. And outside of that, Everton's fixtures are really strong. Again, if you're looking to bench boost in 37, Branthwaite has Sheffield United at home in 37. So I like the idea of having a Branthwaite, a Tarkowski, a Mikalenko, but why not just go for the cheapest defender, considering he's very good for bonus points. And he does have some attacking threat too. So those are the defenders I'd be considering largely. It does depend on your strategy, and I'd love to know down below, if you are making a defender transfer this week, who are you bringing in? So lots of people this week looking at their bench, and it actually has Bukayo Saka on it. And I know this is a very difficult decision to make. I myself am really struggling with this decision. So I always like to caveat a section by saying, I'm struggling myself and I don't know the answer to this, but I thought it was at least worth the discussion. Is benching Saka a bad decision? And there were some people that asked, like, would you start Saka or, and then they gave a player. Saka is one of the best FPL options in recent years and this year as well. So I need to start by saying I think Saka is a better option than Garnacho, Solanke, Gordon and Foden. So we're looking at who is the better asset. It's Saka. The other thing about Saka is he has multiple routes to points. And I love to play players and pick players wherever possible that they have multiple routes to points. And what I mean by that is his open play goal threat is decent. His open play assist threat is decent. That is 2 routes to points. So it's not like he only has a creativity like we've seen from some players, like Bruno Fernandes largely is a creative player, or some players only get goal opportunities, especially like Liverpool strikers, for example. But Saka's got everything there. He also takes a lot of free kicks and corners, especially in swinging corners. So there are 2 further possibilities there. And he's first choice penalty taker. And on top of that, he plays 90 minutes, so he's always on the pitch. That's a lie, by the way. He's been sold off recently, but in a game like this, he will play 90 minutes. So, with Saka, probably 6 or 7 routes to points. So, let's say that Saka is having an absolute stinker, right? A stinker of a game, not getting any opportunities. Man City are largely dominating, but City concede a corner, Saka takes it, Gabriel scores it. Firstly, I would sob, because I'm probably going to have either of them in my starting 11, but that is a possibility, right? Just a corner assist. Then, let's say in the 90th minute, City make a clumsy tackle and Arsenal get a penalty. Saka comes away with that if he scores that penalty of like a 14-pointer. That is what can happen with a player that has multiple routes to points. Some of these other players don't have it. Foden and Garnacho as 2 of the players on this list, and actually Gordon as well, will not have any other routes to points in that they won't take corners, they won't take free kicks, and they won't take penalties. Gordon could if Isak isn't on the pitch, but otherwise it'll be Isak. So that's why I struggle with benching Saka ahead of some of these players, because of those multiple routes to points. But then when you look at it on the flip side, he has the most difficult fixture in the league outside of Arsenal, which he can't play because he plays for Arsenal. So it can't get any more difficult. And this is such an important game for City that they're not going to make silly mistakes you wouldn't imagine anyway, or there will at least be fewer of them. So I'm not saying Saka's not a good option, of course he is, and that's why I'm having him on my wildcard, but if there is a week to bench him, it's this. I don't know how much you believe in or care about projected points, but I went around to every single site that I know that does projected points, which is like 5 or 6 of them. Garnacho, Solanke, Gordon, Foden, Saka. Saka is bottom of those 5 players on every single site. And I think what points projections do, AI, or whatever you want to call these things, is they don't have sentimental or emotional bias. They are not scared of Saka's EO. They are not scared of benching Saka. They are looking at it and saying, based on the fixtures that these players have, their underlying data, a variety of different things, who is most likely to score the most points? And Saka is bottom on all of them. I'm not necessarily saying that you should buy into that, but what I am saying is, if there is a week to bench Saka, it's this. And my prediction of how this game will go, I said that I think City will win 2-1. I said there is a chance that it's 2-2. There's also a chance it's like a 1-0 or 1-1. But I'm predicting, let's say then, I think Arsenal will score between 1 and 2 goals. Is there a chance Saka is involved in those 2 goals? Absolutely. And I think there is a good chance he is. But is he likely to get 2 attacking returns? If I'm saying I don't even think 2 returns for Arsenal is that likely, you would say probably what you're looking at for Saka is 0 or 1 return. When you also consider there will be other players getting returns in that game, maybe a clean sheet for either team, you're not even confirming 3 bonus points. So I think what you're probably looking like for Saka is somewhere between, this is just a random guess, probably between like 2 and 9 points. So if Saka gets 8 or 9 points and the player that you play instead gets 2, yes, you've lost 6 or 7 points, but is that the end of the world? I think people are stressing over this decision a lot more than they should be. If Saka does get 2+ returns, it's just terrible luck because nothing is pointing towards that. And I think that's the case with most players here. I don't look at any of these players and say, like, realistically, they're going to get that many returns. So I think they'll probably be fairly close to each other. But to finally answer the question, it's not a bad decision to bench Saka. I probably will bench Saka this week for Garnacho. But I would say out of the 4 players that I've listed here, Garnacho, Solanke, Gordon and Foden, I would have it in this rough order. I'd have Solanke top, given that he's on penalties and he's got the best underlying data on this list, at least the highest goal threat. So I'd have Solanke as the best asset. Then I'd have Gordon because he's excellent at home, strong underlying data, and I think this is a game that Newcastle will need to win. A lot of their key players got some rest. Isak's back fully fit too. So I think Gordon second. I'd have Foden third, Garnacho fourth, and Saka fifth. I'm not sitting on the fence there. That's the order that I would have them in. So I would play all of these players ahead of Saka, or at least be happy to, and at least consider it. On the flip side, if you are sat there and just thinking Saka is brilliant, I think Arsenal and City will have goals in it. Some people predict this game being like 3-3, 4-4. If that's the way you see this game going, if you think there is a strong chance Arsenal score 3+ goals, then you absolutely start Bukayo Saka. Hopefully that's clear. Hopefully that helped you out. And I would love to know down below, do you own Saka? And if you own Saka, are you looking to bench him or start him this week? So I'm going to keep this section fairly short because I discussed Son, Salah, Palmer with respect to captaincy in tons of detail in the game week preview video. There's a 15-minute section on captaincy. So if after you've watched this, if you're still struggling with captaincy and you want some objective data to go alongside your decision, go and watch the game week preview video. It was actually the first section of that video. But there were some questions not only around captaincy, but sort of hypothetically speaking, if I didn't own Salah, Son or Palmer and I could only bring in one, who would I bring in this week? And largely the way that I would approach this is I would flip the question back on you and just say, if you were on a free hit this week and you owned all 3, but you could only captain one, who would you captain? Because I think if you don't own any of them, you bring in the player that you would like to captain. I think it's that simple. And I think it's equally the case. So let's say you have one of them. So let's say you've got Son, but you don't have Palmer or Salah. If Son didn't exist, who would you rather captain out of Salah and Palmer? You bring that player in. I think that is largely how I would decide this week, is thinking about how would you order them in terms of captaincy, and that's how I would order them in terms of priority. But also, it's not just about game week 30, right? And for some people, you might not be able to bring them all in, or it might not be easy to do so. So it's not only about sort of prioritizing, it's about like which ones do you decide to have. And I think that then comes back to the idea of free hit 34 versus no free hit 34, because if you're not free hitting in 34, Son blanks in 34 and Palmer plays Arsenal away. Like, you don't want these 2 assets in 34. You might be able to get away with benching one or maybe both, but they're certainly not a priority to bring in. So I would argue if you've got no free hit 34, the real target and priority for you should probably be Mohamed Salah. But on the flip side, if you are free hitting in 34, you can have Salah for that double. You might be able to bring in Salah next week, but you are definitely going to want Son and Palmer. So maybe those 2 should be the priority, given the future that we've got ahead of us and given the fact that you can, at the very least, own Salah for game week 34. That being said, I don't see a world in which you don't want to have Salah next week against Sheffield United. Unless he looks really unfit during this game and maybe picks up a knock, then you might not want to. But assuming he's fit, Salah's comfortably the best captain in game week 31 against Sheffield United. So I guess back on the other side, if you're going to have Salah anyway next week, maybe why not do it this week? But I do think it comes down to sort of who do you think scores the most points this week. The only other final thing that does need to obviously be considered is what is the route? Because if it's Palmer in for 3 or Salah in for a -4, I think in most of those cases, you go Palmer this week and you look at Salah next week for a -4. Equally, if Son can come in for 3 this week and Salah can't, then you go for Son. So I would think in combination, who would I captain if I could captain any of them? And I'd sort of order the captain. That would help me with the priority. I'd think about whether I'm free hitting in 34 or not. That would help my decision making as well. And how easy it is to bring in the players and who I'm selling. Because if you're selling Watkins and Saka to bring in Salah, then that doesn't look very good. Whereas if you're selling Hwang Hee-chan to bring in Palmer, then that obviously looks much better. So hopefully that helps you. In isolation, I think entry point wise, the entry point for Son and Palmer is better this week because their fixtures this week are significantly better than their fixtures in 31. But in isolation, Salah's entry point is better in 31 because the fixture is much better then. I've probably not really answered your question, but hopefully at least talking about it in a bit of detail helps. And I would love to know down below, is anyone going to own the 3 of them? Is anyone going to own none of them? And if you're only owning 1 or 2, who is it that you'll have for Game Week 30? So throughout the week, I've had a lot of questions around Erling Haaland, and people are almost like disappointed. Like, Rosh, you went without Haaland in Game Week 8. Why aren't you discussing going without Haaland? So one of the questions is Haaland really essential given his current form? He's missed penalties. He's missed big chances. He certainly doesn't look as good as he has been in the past since coming back from injury. Now, I think everyone would feel pretty comfortable saying that. He's not bad, but he's certainly not in good, hot form where he's going to, if you feel like he's going to get you 2 or 3 goals a game. So I do agree with that. And also ranking does matter, as we'll discuss in a second. And then some people are like, why haven't you considered going without Haaland in your wildcard draft? For me, the reason I went without Haaland in Game Week 8 is because at that time, you had Kieran Trippier and Trent who were playing excellently. And squeezing one of them in was very viable to try and improve the amount of points you got. You also had tons of really good, like £8 million-ish midfielders. I wanted to have, did I have Foden? Probably didn't actually. But I wanted to squeeze Luis Diaz, and I think I had Saka in there. I think I might have gone for another couple of mid-price midfielders. I can't remember exactly, but my midfield was stacked. And I also wanted to go with like Darwin, Alvarez, and then there was another mid-priced forward too. So I almost wanted to squeeze in, I think I had Watkins, like 8 really expensive attackers, go for a really strong, expensive defence. And I realised that I wasn't captaining Haaland in any of the upcoming game weeks. So a combination of not captaining him having very difficult fixtures, by the way. That spell for Haaland was terrible fixtures-wise. And on top of that, wanting to obviously have a really strong team as well. I just looked at it and I just thought, I don't need Haaland here. I think my non-Haaland wildcard draft has a very good chance of outscoring my Haaland one. I don't see that now at all for numerous reasons. Number one, I want to captain Haaland in some of the upcoming game weeks. He plays Luton at home soon. I definitely want him in that week. I will just say on the counter to that, there are other good captaincy options every week. So you could get away with not captaining Haaland, but as long as he's still playing and fit, I want to captain Haaland in at least one of the next 3. He then obviously doubles in 37, and I'd want him in 37 too. And the fixtures in between 31 and 37, if you ignore obviously the double, they're still very, very strong. And I'll be free hitting in 34 as well, so I don't even need to have him in 34. So for me, the fixtures are brilliant, and I'd captain him and at least, looking at it, at least 2 or 3 of the upcoming game weeks, and definitely Luton at home and in 37. And City have the league to play for as well. I mean, all of these things put together, it's difficult to suggest going without him, even given the fact that he's not been finishing all of his chances. So for me, fixtures-wise, doesn't make sense. Captaincy-wise, makes a little bit of sense given the other good options, but still not full sense. And then on top of that, like I said, the other reason previously I liked going without Haaland is I felt like my squad was just so much better. And the bench boost is coming up, which definitely makes it a reason to go without because you can really have a strong bench. But just for fun, I removed Haaland and put Solanke in Haaland's place, who's the third forward I'd probably go for if I removed him. So I had Isak, Solanke, Darwin. And then I looked where else I could put money. And what I did is I had Solanke instead of Haaland, I put Foden in instead of Garnacho, and I had Trippier instead of Lascelles. So what it comes down to is Haaland, Garnacho, Lascelles, and given that Garnacho and Lascelles don't play for me every week and they're fine on a bench boost, versus Solanke, Foden, and Trippier. You could just look at that and go, yeah, that's a much better. I'd prefer that. And then in that case, don't go with Haaland. But when you sacrifice Haaland, you want to do it for a specific reason. Like, I think I can squeeze in 2 or 3 better midfielders. And I think Trippier or Trent have just such a nice run. And they are performing so well. Maybe, if like, I don't know, City, if Foden was playing even better, Haaland was really struggling. And let's say Newcastle were like top of the league for expected goals conceded. Maybe that combination would make a lot of sense. Maybe, I don't know, Bournemouth's attacking data was better and Solanke was in like a really hot streak and all of the things lined up to make me think it maybe, but it just doesn't feel worth it. I looked at my team and just like, I'd just rather have Haaland in there. So I've listed 3 reasons that I think I would be tempted to go without Haaland. What are the reasons that I might be tempted to go without? The first being if you have low team value. Because I've just spoken about the fact that I can build a team that I really like and want with Haaland still in there. But if your team value is like 100 or even worse, let's say you've had a really poor season, it's like 98, then your team value might be like 7 million less than me, in which case it is a viable strategy to go without Haaland. So if your team value is low, I'd consider it. The other thing is if you are really chasing rank and mini leagues. I'm not talking about just slightly unhappy with where you're at. I'm talking this person's ranked 1 million here. For some of you, you might be happy with that. But if you were aiming for top 100k, yeah, you need to start thinking about risk. Or if you're 80 points off your mini league leader, again, it's viable to consider doing it. So dependent upon where you are and your team value, that would affect it. But also the other important thing is if you don't think he'll do well, don't just go without because your team value is low and because you're chasing, if you still think Haaland is exceptional, because that makes no sense. But if you think, yeah, Haaland's not in great form, I think other strikers could get close, and I think there are other midfielders that I'd like to upgrade to, then yes, I would consider going without him. So do I think it's worth considering? Yes, but for most people with decent value, relatively happy with where their season's at, and for most people that think he's a decent option, I just probably wouldn't consider it myself. So guys, I've received a few questions this week and I probably should have covered it previously, so I do apologise for that. And it's around Gameweek 30 wildcard because I'm obviously wildcarding this week. But some people are struggling to understand how much their draft should differ if they don't have a free hit in 34. Because obviously I am wildcarding with free hit 34 in mind. Also, some people are like, if I don't have a free hit or a bench boost, I don't actually think my team is set up for a bench boost, by the way, because I've got like Lascelles and Garnacho in there. You can't go much cheaper than those two anyway. So I don't think the bench boost thing would necessarily change. But obviously, if you're not free hitting in 34, you need to target the 34 doubles a little bit more. So I'll just explain where the team is similar and where it differs from mine. I'll just note quickly, by the way, I'm not going to do a section at the end of this video talking about my latest wildcard draft because it is exactly the same as the wildcard draft that I showed you on YouTube yesterday. So if you want to see what my latest wildcard team's like, again, after this video, feel free to go and watch that wildcard draft from yesterday. I haven't yet made any changes, even based on the press conference updates. The only thing I'm a bit unsure about is captaincy. So captaincy is switching around a little bit. So starting with the goalkeepers, they're the same as the ones that I've got, but I definitely would have, obviously, a keeper that doubles in 34 and a keeper that doubles in 37. So Raya doubles in 34, Petrovic doubles in 36 and 37, and these two keepers rotate relatively well, and they'll cover you for the remainder of the season. I think there are a couple of weeks where they don't rotate very well. One of the weeks is game week 35, which isn't perfect because I think Petrovic has Villa away and Raya's got Tottenham away. So that's the only week that really you don't look at it and it's particularly nice. And I think game week 32 or 3 might be the other one where they just don't have the best set of fixtures to go with. But generally speaking, I think they'll cover you quite well. You could go for Kelleher, but we don't know if he'll be fit for 30. Not fit, but don't know if he'll be starting for 34 if Alisson's fit and available then. So I just think Raya and Petrovic serve you very, very well. Gusto, I would still have, despite the fact he plays Arsenal in 34, because he's good before that and beyond that. 8 Nuri, I've got in my actual draft, but again, he's so good because the fixtures are good up till 34, doubles in 34, Luton at home in 35. So I would absolutely have 8 Nuri in there. Branthwaite, great fixtures outside of the double, but of course, like I said, he has a good double as well because he plays Nottingham Forest at home in there. So I would have Branthwaite in there. Gabriel, again, I would have at least one Arsenal defender, but here you can see I've got Raya and Gabriel. It does block Havertz from coming in, but I just still think that's an absolutely fine combination to have. And then Munoz, who knows, the main man that I still can't pronounce his name, he would be in there as well, simply because Crystal Palace's double is very, very nice, and he'll serve you well in the immediate term too. I think that's a really, really nice defense. A lot of people would say, what about Pickford? I absolutely love Pickford in there as well. If you wanted to go for Pickford instead of Raya, you could do that, and that might allow a Havertz spot too. So I don't mind that combination as well. So very strong defense. It does differ quite a lot from my defense, and I think the defense is the key part of the draft that would differ, because in the midfield and attack, I think 6 of the players are the same. So Saka, Palmer, Son, Salah, Haaland, Darwin, those 6 would be exactly the same in a free hit 34 versus non-free hit 34 wildcard draft. So those wouldn't change. Obviously, Saka, Salah, Darwin, all double in 34, which serve you well. Haaland and Palmer are good outside of that. And then Son is just a fantastic asset. I think you can probably get away with benching Son in game week 34. The 2 changes is rather than Isak, I've got Solanke because Solanke's got good short-term fixtures and doubles in 34. And I've got Sarabia instead of Garnacho because, again, Sarabia has short-term fixtures that are very strong and he doubles in 34. So that's it. I think this gives you something like, and I've probably not counted correctly, 8 or 9 doublers in 34, which I think is very, very strong. It probably gives you like 5 maybe doublers in 37 right now. We can count Petrovic, Gusto, Palmer, Son, Haaland. So it gives you 5 currently doublers in 37. And then obviously between 34 and 37, you have 1 in 35, 1 in 36, and 1 in 37. You'd have 3 free transfers to bring in 3 further doublers, which would get you to 8. And then that would probably be fine, because the ones that you could have that aren't doubling, Branthwaite against Sheffield United at home, 8 Nuri against Crystal Palace at home, Salah is absolutely fine in a double game week, even if he's only got one fixture. So some of the other players that you've got, you don't need to get to 11 doublers. So I feel like this will allow you to attack 34, attack the short term, also cover you slightly well for 37 too. And I think it's a very strong wildcard draft. Some people might not be able to afford this draft. I think if you can't afford this draft, you either do Darwin to someone like Cunha or Mateta. I think that's the obvious place to downgrade. So you go without Darwin. But if you didn't want to go without Darwin, downgrading Raya could save you a bit of funds because he's 5 million. Go for a Kelleher in that spot instead. And maybe that offers the route to Havertz in the future. Or, and I don't necessarily love this, but you just go without Heung-min Son and maybe go for a Richarlison instead if he's fit and available, which it looks like he could be potentially. So I think that's your other option there to free up funds. I'd love to know if you're wildcarding in 30 and not free hitting in 34, is this similar to your draft? So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 30 deadline decisions video, a birthday video as well. And I really do appreciate the support and all of the kind messages that I've already received. And if you did enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button. Make sure to subscribe as well. And make sure to tune into the deadline stream tomorrow, which will be at 9 a.m., 2 hours before the deadline. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.